So just when you think you have a basic understanding of where the economy is, that you saw inflation trend down and then you saw it pick back up, the consumer price index at 3.9%. That is not the target rate of 2% that the Federal Reserve is looking for. That's double, kitten, double where the Federal Reserve wants to be. You're like, okay, things are not going so great. And then you take a general mood that exists within the country. This general mood of things are not good. We are not in a happy, strong place. This economy is problematic and dangerous and has no end in sight from being problematic and dangerous. When you saw the New Hampshire primaries take place, of course, they asked people, hey, what is your thought on this? And what is your thought on that? This was CBS News, and this was what they found out.
Yeah, so people are really bummed out about the economy here in New Hampshire, even if the overall big picture numbers are going in the right direction. And even if people's own personal experiences in general are going okay, there's a lot of gloom. And one of the reasons is food prices, for example, generally going up. And we talked to a bunch of people outside of a grocery store in Derry, New Hampshire. We couldn't find anybody feeling good about the economy. And that's just human nature. Psychologically, you go into a store, if you're paying more for items that you get every week, that really sticks with you. It really annoys you. It gets you down. People were upset about it. And so are they making it? Yeah, they're making it. But are they bothered by the fact that frozen OJ has gone up double digits and that steak on Friday is up double digits? Absolutely. And that's really driving people's perspective on things.
So that was out of California. I'm Tony Katz. Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. Dr. Matt Will joins us, economist at the University of Indianapolis, because with that backdrop, this was today's news, Dr. Will. The U.S. economy grew faster than expected. You're talking about a GDP, gross domestic product, of 3.3%, which in any economy or an average economy, we'd say that's just fine. That's some solid growth. But we saw inflation tick back up. There are now indicators that inflation is ticking back down. Talk to me about the numbers. What do they say?
Oh, goodness. There's so much to cover here. Let me first of all say that this is a good number. There's a lot of good numbers in this report. I am not going to say that there's there are a few things that are concerning to me, but overall 3.3 is great. But why is it down? That's the most important thing. And let me say what the headline should be. The headline should be Biden is losing the war on the economy, because the economy is looking good, but not because of Biden. The number one thing in this report that causes the GDP to go up is lower inflation. Now, right before we went on the air, you mentioned to me, well, the other reports say it's double what it should be, and you just mentioned that. That's true, but in this report says that the inflation last quarter was 1.5%. That's dramatically lower than what we were talking about just a couple weeks ago and below the target for the Fed. That's because there's different inflation reports coming out of the government. This one contradicts the others. This one says inflation is good. So that's one factor. You want me to go into the other ones? You want to chat for the inflation?
You have to go into all of them. There is no level of wonkification that we can't walk down, because this gets confusing. You know, how government agencies and others manipulate data to their benefit, as opposed to what we know when we're the people, just like you saw from that CBS reporting, at the store, seeing meat being double in price and other things being double in price.
Well, according to this report, not the CPI, not the PPI, not the CPE, all the other ones, the say inflation's still double what it should be. This one says it's down. So in that respect, Biden is losing the war because Powell is winning the war. Powell's trying to reduce inflation and Biden's trying to increase it from spending. The second bad thing is that the GDP is up because government spending is up 4.3% for the year. That is not a good reason for government for the GDP to go up, is because government's spending more money. Next, consumer spending is up 2.8% in this report. That's below the national average of the GDP, but it's pulling, it's causing some juice in the economy. That's not a good thing. Why is it bad? Because credit card debt, highest spending in history. According to the top banks in the country, highest delinquency that we've seen in recent memory. Third reason, and this GDP report says it, people are saving less money. We've talked about this before. Again, in the fourth quarter, people are dipping into their savings to spend money. And this great holiday season that everyone was bragging about, the fourth quarter was worse than the third quarter as far as holiday spending.
Now it gets stupid. Talking to Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis, all we heard in fourth quarter spend was about how people were spending more, but no one answered the question, were they spending more and getting more? Or were they spending more for the average things that they were going to buy? So they bought less, but they spent more to actually get less. That question never got fully answered. But I want to go back to a little bit of what you were getting into there. The winning the war conversation. If the fight is between Biden and Powell, Biden spending versus and those programs that engage spending versus Powell working the interest rates.
And Powell, also Biden versus capitalism. I want to talk about that too.
This is exactly where I was going to go. Don't steal my thunder, sir. That's just rude.
Apologies.
It is that we're the ones who end up losing, because in this conversation, this almost conversation in the ether about where the economy is, I don't mind a 3.3 GDP. I'd be very happy if that showed the country is really starting to kick. 3.3 is a wonderful number for a country with the economic output of the United States. But the American people aren't feeling any of this. We're still stuck in it. We still see the closings. We see the higher rents, for example, and what that's doing to the restaurant industry, closing people out, the higher labor costs. Even if you can get people to show up, you're paying the higher labor costs, even though they don't always show up. That is putting the squeeze on hospitality. We're seeing less. Therefore, you're seeing more crowding in those places, those costs going up. We're taking the hit on every side, yet Wall Street seems to want to play a game of things are great. So talk to me about the part two of this, which is Biden versus capitalism.
Well, the reason Wall Street sees things as great is because Wall Street is shifting their focus away from Washington, which I've said for years they need to do. Stop looking at Washington and look at Main Street, look at manufacturing. Private investment was up 10% in the third quarter. That's an amazing amount. Biden has nothing to do with private investment. In fact, he tries to punish companies. He tries to punish them for reinvesting their money. He wants to increase their taxes. He wants to punish them for trying to do stock buybacks. He wants to destroy capitalism, but capitalism says, no, we're going to do AI. We're going to reinvent our companies. We're going to invest. In addition, all the restrictions he's putting on businesses, exports were up 6.3% in the fourth quarter. So capitalism is saying, here, Biden, you're trying to harm us, ban our business from exporting, regulate us more. We're going to export more. We're going to invest more. So Wall Street's looking to itself and companies and saying, look, we're doing good things. We're growing the economy. They're winning the battle against Biden. Powell is winning the battle against Biden. For the American consumer, we're lucky Biden is losing most of the battles. But as you said, you go to the store, you're still getting less for the same dollar.
Let's talk where we are losing the battle, where the American consumer is clearly losing the battle. And you brought it up earlier. Third quarter credit card debt was $1.08 trillion. Now, I have not seen yet data on fourth quarter credit card debt, but you started bringing up the concept of defaults, talking to Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis. Can you talk to me about the data you're seeing about defaults? Do we have data on fourth quarter debt? And at what moment, well, if that moment hasn't already come, are people ringing the bell saying this is completely unsustainable? The crash is coming, if not here.
Well, you know what? We don't have the data because the banks aren't releasing it. They released anecdotal information. So the top 4 banks in the country said they have seen record level of delinquencies in credit card and debt payments that occurred in the fourth quarter. So we're waiting for the actual numbers on that. But I wonder if they're just afraid to tell us because it's that bad. And then this report does tell us that we're saving less money. The savings rate dropped 0.2%. We're saving less money. And again, anecdotal from the big banks, because they haven't released the actual numbers, they say highest credit card debt in history, higher delinquencies than we've seen, savings rates below pre-pandemic levels. All of those things point to what you just said, Tony, that the consumer is credit crunched, which we've talked about the credit crunch before. They're strapped for money. They're dipping into their savings just to make ends meet on a daily basis.
if the consumer is under a credit crunch, and we have discussed this in multiple ways. So, for example, you want to go buy a used car, but the bank will not lend you money to buy a used car because they're concerned of your ability to pay it back. And then when you go to the used car lot, they don't even exist anymore because they weren't able to get loans to purchase vehicles from the auction because they feared that the consumer coming to the now empty lot wouldn't be able to pay back the loan. So it hit in both ways. It would seem to me, a novice, Dr. Matt Will, that a credit crunch would be disastrous for everybody on Wall Street and Midwest Main Street. Do I have this wrong?
Okay, you're kind of naive to say you're naive. That is incorrect. You described it very well. That's exactly what what's happening right now. And the credit crunch, to go a little bit further, is we have not yet seen the volume of defaults rolling into, let's say, commercial real estate. Think of all those empty office buildings in the downtown in a big city. Those office buildings were on lease for a long time. People are not going back to work into the office. They are, but not as much. It's not going to go back to pre-pandemic level. So what if you've loaned money for someone to buy a building? They're going to default on that. And we're starting to see those default rates increase. So the next big tsunami coming is the commercial real estate credit card default. And that's going to be the next iteration of the crunch. And that's
real estate credit default. So it was, I think the Wall Street Journal had a piece about this because we did discuss it. There's going to be, before 2028, a tremendous amount, Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis, of loans that come to maturity. And when those loans come to maturity and you can't refinance at a better rate or even the same rate, you're going to be paying far more than you bought that property for. There are going to be a fair amount of people more than convinced to give up the property, considering that people still aren't coming back to the office in numbers that make those properties worthwhile. How does the commercial real estate market and that impending, coming, clearly looming issue affect us on Midwest Main Street?
We saw it in March. Remember the bank crisis we talked about? And I said, it's not going away. It's just going down a little bit. We're just letting it, it's going to sleep, but it's going to rear its ugly head. Most of the loans made by local regional banks are commercial loans. They sell their mortgages. They don't keep your mortgage. They sell it to somebody else. So the loans on their books are these long-term commercial loans. And when those things come due, as you just mentioned in the report you stated, those things are going to cause the banks to have a crisis. And I believe that the bank crisis is not yet gone. And I keep talking about this in my speeches because, people say, oh, March, it was here, it was massive, it was fixed. No, it was just subdued for a moment. It will be back.
And what does it look like when it's back? How do we see it? Like, what is the indicator for people? I don't mean to ask a question on a question. What's the indicator for the layman where they go, yep, time to hunker it all down?
When your regional banks go bankrupt. Now, I'm not predicting that. There are solid regional banks, okay? We've mentioned that before. The regional banks, especially in Indiana, are fantastically safe from interest rate risk. But where they're not safe from is default risk, which means if someone doesn't pay back their loan.
But wouldn't that argument also apply to large banks? You could say, well, they've got more cash, so they have a safer position, but they also deal with bigger loans. One could ostensibly argue. So doesn't the problem also apply there?
It does, but not as much because the regional banks are more on a percentage basis. Most of their portfolio is in local, regional construction, commercial loans. The national banks have much more. They have bonds to Coca-Cola or bonds to IBM. So they have a different portfolio structure, but all those local banks, your hospitals, your apartment complexes, they go to the local bank to get those loans. And so that's why there's more exposure to the regional and local banks.
Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis. I appreciate taking the time to be with us.